Hey guys, it's N. Well, it's been a long time since the last Today in Agent K. Mainly because I felt the majority of the units since my last video were a bit samey. But now, the meta seems like it wants to slowly shift again, and I thought it would help to keep you all in the loop so nobody falls behind. Or at least nobody falls behind to anything other than RNG. Let's slowly ramp up to the newer units and start off with who's come out since last time. Which means we start with Asura. In short, he's a single damage monster. On release, he was absolutely shredding through health and preservant stacks, and no one could really survive him unless they were invincible, had flee, or some other sort of overhealth effect. And this really wasn't helped by the fact he can loop his ST twice, and don't slouch on his tankiness either. He can take a fair beating unlike many of the other power types before him, a la Asura Ken or something similar. And he also has multi-revive on his own, which, again, further cements ASK deeper into the ground. Nowadays, he's still pretty good and a nice addition to your team. His damage is still some of the best, but a lot more units have invincibility in some sort of way, so he can't just rip through everyone like he could on release. Solia was actually kind of a monster. He did great damage and could loop like Asura could, but his ST hits 2 units instead of 1, and can steal preservant stacks even if you're invincible or had some other way to ignore damage. And on top of all of that, this preservant stealing effect went for his ST and SP. He could grind down units ridiculously fast because of this. If a unit without invincible was unfortunate enough to get caught in his abilities, the damage would most likely take a stack off, and then the innate ability of his ST would take another. At the time, he felt kinda broken. With him and Asura, it felt like other units really didn't stand a chance against them. It's funny, with MT Kenshi and P fully unlocked, he could steal a grit stack. If you had him on slower teams, he'd get annihilated, but on faster teams, he'd turn invincible and have some sort of use. He was niche, but some people had a place for him. Solia pretty much came out, patted him on the head, called him cute, and then took everything he had and made it 10 times better. And also, just like Asura, Solia is tanky. Very tanky for a power type. He starts off with invincibility, and his health alongside his preservant stacks are nothing to scoff at. To the point where when I didn't have a good life type, I'd put him in front to suck up a majority of the damage. He has multi-revive too, so even if you put him down, he resets with 5 or so preservant stacks and gets up again. With all these effects, as you can imagine, he hasn't exactly fallen off. He's not the unstoppable monster he was before, but a bit more so than Asura, he's still a sturdy addition to your team and can definitely help. Rin was unexpected. Now, when I originally saw this flimsy stick bug, I thought we were getting another support, which would have been odd so soon after we got the support Toki. But to my surprise, she's the direct opposite of a healer. She's a nuke. At this point, just expect all the units I'm talking about to have great survivability regardless of whatever type they are. As like the others, she's pretty hard to put down with her multi-revive, preservant stacks, etc. But similar to the old AoE meta units, she simply sharts out damage onto everybody.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
On release, it felt like she was putting everyone else to shame with how much damage she did, and especially so if you had her scroll. But that's not all. If you had her CNP leveled up, she could loop her ST twice, alongside giving everyone on her team preservant stacks. I'm sure she gave people flashbacks to Beast Pluto and Juzen for how insane she was, alongside the fact that she's tankier than both of those characters. A little fun fact if you've noticed, we're going in order of the released characters, meaning that 3 insane damage units came out near the same time. If you pulled all 3 of these, you pretty much hit your enemies with an avalanche of damage constantly. If it wasn't for Revive, dojo matches most likely would have ended in 2 turns. But as for how she is now, she's the second best AoE damage dealer in the game. And combined with all the buffs she gives you, she's still hanging around S tier to this day. Toki, no, the other one, at face value is pretty much a tankier but less damage dealing Asura. Healthy, high damage, can loop, has revives, etc. But his main unique feature is he's an anti-heal unit. After he lands his ST, whenever your healer heals you, it hurts a noticeable bit. In comparison to the others, he's good, but he didn't feel necessary. His gimmick might give him some longevity, but as for right now, he kind of feels interchangeable with everyone else I've mentioned. After him, we got Jaggy. As the biggest Jaggy fan, you know I had to pull for him. And as this game's the biggest piece of shit, you already know I didn't. Anyways, Madman Jaggy here is an interesting unit. He's tanky, but damage-wise, he's kind of eh. Even though he has an AoE ST that does a fair amount of damage, it's not exactly good when you consider Rin still nukes entire teams. This may make you think he's a throwaway character, but that's until you read this tiny little thing in his description known as deflect. You see, deflect is a new effect that lets Jaggy, well, deflect effects on him onto the other team, meaning you slowly grind down the other team with debuffs as long as he's alive. And given some of the newer effects we'll get into in a bit, I don't think he's completely useless. He's like the Uno reverse card in your deck. It can be helpful, but only if the rest of your hand is somewhat functional. A great companion piece to a solid team, but he isn't really required or meta shifting. After that was KG. Keiji's kind of boring to talk about, to be honest. He's an overall amazing unit. He can give grit stacks, he can loop his ST attack which does monstrous damage, and he feels nigh unkillable at times. On release he was meta, and combined with Rin and the others I've mentioned so far, he was boosting teams up the ranks, and even now he's still a solid life type due to everything he does. But there's something else noteworthy about him, and it's his aura effect. Now it doesn't do anything super crazy other than the normal stuff like, you know, buffing, damage, and attack and all of that. But if you remember, there was a certain other life type that had an aura effect right before Keiji. Yeah, face grabber Falco kinda got gibbed by Keiji's existence. No one's exactly surprised by this though. Even last video I said the second another aura unit comes out, Falco's pretty much done for. And that's basically what happened. While he's still tanky, he pretty much provides nothing else to the team. And the other Gentos do all the other effects that he does outside of his field. So there's not much of a reason to keep him around. We had a good run, Gento gamers. The other two will have to carry his legacy. Now you may be wondering what happened to Rao. Considering Falco was the only unit that could stop him, and Keiji's field can't apply silence or anything like that, what's stopping Rao? Nothing! This fucking germ refuses to die in the meta, and I'm so sick of dealing with him. Since the most effective counter to him was shot dead, and only one other unit right now, which we'll get to in a bit, can stop him, yeah, I'm sick of him, and I'm sick of dragging the Temu version of him around to barely be able to combat him. Back to more current units, after Keiji, Dante came out. Then after that, Carlos. If I had to say anything about Dante, he confirmed my suspicions that Evade wasn't going to be an exclusive effect, as he got it too. And unlike Amoeba, his just has a chance to activate without any specific characters needing to be against or with him. Other than that, kinda seemed like a fart in the wind, to be honest. He came out, people rained him for a second, and then he got replaced almost immediately. There wasn't really much standout about him other than his Evade, because everything else seemed pretty average at best. Hopefully we'll have another decent unit that comes out that has Evade, because Dante disappeared almost as fast as he appeared. And I doubt we're gonna get any reruns of him anytime soon. Now we get to Carlos for real. And I'm gonna keep it straight. Carlos is a menace. You know how I said all the other starter units were tanky and strong? Carlos is pretty jacked. He does a ton of damage and gets a shitload of health. At times, I've seen him have up to 23 Preservance stacks. And since him and Keiji, bonus if they're together, they've helped me clutch out games where the rest of my teams died. Other than those simple things, his SP allows him to take Preservance stacks, which is pretty helpful. But then we get into the craziness. You see, his ST is strong. Does tons of damage, which is pretty cute. But then when you read down his Bible-length description, you see it cuts off invincibility. And if he hits a unit that isn't invincible yet but can become invincible, he deactivates it for their next turn. But dear viewer, this isn't even the worst part. The worst part is if he does his ST 6 times, he can take away revives. His kit is what had me interested for the future of LR. Which I know I say this pretty much every video, but seeing as we're at the point of cutting off invincibility and revives, I feel like it's way more relevant now than it was before. After this, most of us were quivering at the thought of what happens next. And I feel Carlos here is the start of what I'd like to call the goofy effect meta. Which when I get into these next units, I'm sure you'll understand why. As after him, we got Kenshiro and Ray, who was the anniversary unit. As always, tanky, does damage, yada yada. He has the flee effect like Yama, which helps his survivability, but he also has this little tiny effect called instant death. The name is self-explanatory. After it's inflicted on a unit, a few turns later, they just die. No effect will save them, even if they have some sort of revive, preservance stacks, or whatever. Now, it's not exactly instant. It's not like you'll open a match and your team will drop dead like they have the plague, but they'll usually take out one or two of your better units a few turns in. There isn't really much else to elaborate on with them. They're meta like pretty much every other Annie unit. And if you missed them, you're probably going to want to wait until their rerun. Following the goofy abilities trend of just having crazy effects, we got the new Ryuken. And what's his effect? Seal. Again, boy, I sure love it when Sega repackages the same effect 80,000 different ways. As I'm sure you've noticed if you've been playing the game for a while, no matter what time period you played the game, there would always be some weird companion piece unit that did some sort of seal or stopped your abilities. And in short, Ryuken is the newest version of that. The annoying unit that blocks yours. And this way he can pretty much counter every unit I've mentioned so far. Kinda hard to get your effects off when your character simply can't move. Not much else I can say about him, other than the fact that I'm annoyed that we got the seal unit replaced so fast when we just barely got over this Bug, and no, I'm not gonna respect him and call him his name, I'm just gonna call him Bug, who was already pretty tanky and annoying to deal with and stuck around for way longer than he should've. So Sega tossing a new one at us so soon is gonna be fun for Dojo. He's a companion piece like I said for Jaggy, but a significantly better and more impactful one because as you could guess, this effect is a lot more intense and oppressive than Jaggy's is. Overall, LR is now in a everyone is tanky and has a goofy effect meta. Sky's the limit now that instant death is an actual effect in the game. Legitimately, the only meta shift we can have now is to make a unit that's immune to all debuffs. Probably a support or a life type. Because right now, there's just a lot of stupid shit the meta units can do, and I can't see much other ways to deal with them. The alternative is to do what Sega always does. Slowly phase out the units with newer units, which would make Dojo pretty miserable for a long time for those who fell behind. Even more so than normally, I would say. But anyways, that's been today in HNK. What do you guys think about the current units and their effects? As always, I'm glad to discuss with you guys in the comments, and I've been M, and I am out.